Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Living in the West, a series of lectures, a series of episodes where we discuss a very important topic, the Muslim minorities living in the West. We've discussed several issues regarding this minority. Should they live in the West? What their aims are in the West? And we're going to come through to some of these topics in the future. I have with me today Sheikh Al-Haddad from the Muslim Research and Development Foundation, a think tank and an organisation in the UK providing solutions for those millions of Muslims in the West. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, on previous episodes we've spoken in some detail regarding some of the examples of Muslims living in non-Muslim societies throughout the times, throughout the era of the Islamic period. We spoke about different lands. And there's some terminology here that we need to now look upon. Many of the classical scholars, we find in the classical books, many of the people speak about terminology such as Dar al-Kufr, and this is a very well-known phrase, and Dar al-Harb, for example. How do we apply this, and how do we understand these terminologies, Sheikh?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. These terminologies, such as Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Kufr, and Dar al-Harb, and of course Dar al-Ahd, these terminologies have been used widely by the classical scholars in the books of jurisprudence and sometimes in the books of Aqidah as well. And basically the jurists, they classify the world into two abodes, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. Now, before getting into the definition of these abodes, we need to understand one important issue here, and it is a principle that I would like to draw the attention of all the brothers and sisters watching this program too, which is, before discussing any definition or any classification, we have to understand what are the aims behind this definition, what are we trying to achieve. Same thing when we want to discuss the classification, any classification. For example, you know, in Arabic language, in grammar, grammar, or maybe in even English language or any other languages. If we are discussing, talking about the definition of al-fa'il, the one who does something from a grammatical point of view. If from a grammatical point of view, it is the one who does the fi'il, provided that he comes after the verb, okay, not added to the verb. And there are certain conditions. For example, when I say Haytham drinks tea, okay, Haytham yashrabu al-shahi. طيب, Haytham drinks tea. Here we talk about Haytham. What is the position of Haytham? Haytham, from a linguistic point of view, is mubtada. Okay, the one we started the sentence with. But Haytham, from a general point of view, is the fa'il, is the one who does the fi'il. But from a grammatical point of view, you cannot say that the word Haytham here is the fa'il. Haytham here is a mubtada. So before classifying Haytham or defining what al-fa'il is, what al-mubtada is, you need to understand your context, or what do you want to achieve. Are you defining it because of a grammatical purpose, or are you defining it because of a general linguistic purpose? Therefore, once we say Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Kufr, what do we want to achieve from this classification? Means, are there any certain consequences based on this classification, or there are no consequence. This is very important. Why? Because in many cases we dwell into the definition and the classification, and then after some time we find that there is no real fruit out of this classification or this definition. That is very, very important. So, before getting into this definition and this classification, let us understand the consequences. If we say that the world is divided into two abodes, as some of the fuqaha mentioned, what does that mean? What are the implications? If we say that the whole world is classified into one abode, okay, what are the consequences? Now, once the fuqaha mentioned this classification, of course, they had an aim in their mind, and they are talking about the consequences. That's why we find Al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, who died in 204 Hijrah, he said that the whole world is considered to be one abode. Yeah? And he doesn't classify the world into Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Kufr from this perspective. All of it is one abode. Why? Because he was looking at the consequence, okay, regarding this classification, whereby Muslims are bound to follow ahkam al-Sharia, or the rulings of Sharia, wherever they are. Whether they are living in a state or an abode that is considered to be Dar al-Kufr, or they were living in an abode that is classified as Dar al-Islam. So the classification does not affect the implementation of ahkam al-Islam from this perspective. That's why Al-Shafi'i, his original opinion about this classification is that the whole world is one abode. Now, if we look to the other fuqaha, including many other Shafi'i jurists who understood what the Shafi'i himself said about this classification, the other scholars, including, as I said, the Shafi'is, they classify the whole world mainly to two abodes, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. What is the main consequence? They say, yes, if this land is classified as Dar al-Islam, then there are certain consequences. If it is classified as Dar al-Kufr, there are some other consequences. One of the main consequences is that Muslim is obliged to live in Dar al-Islam, and generally speaking, from a classical point of view, Muslim is not allowed to live in Dar al-Kufr. So this is one of the main consequences. Because of this consequence, the scholars have looked at the globe and they said, yes, there are places where Muslims are allowed to live because of the nature of the system, and there are places where Muslims are not allowed to reside in permanently because of the nature of the system. Therefore, those countries where Muslims can live, we call them Darul Islam. There are these places where Muslims cannot live because of the nature of the system, we call them Dar al-Kufr. So the consequence is really very important and central in this classification. Another major consequence is the fact that in Dar al-Islam, Muslims are, or Muslim rulers, or Muslims in charge, are bound or obliged to implement ahkam sharia. In Dar al-Kufr, Muslims have no authority. They are not in charge of the country, so they cannot implement ahkam sharia, because ahkam sharia, to be implemented in totality and in particular hudud, they have to have authority. The one who is implementing them has to have kind of authority. Therefore, those lands that do not implement ahkam sharia and are not Muslims there, or Muslims there cannot implement ahkam sharia, from this perspective, is classified as Dar al-Kufr. Now,
No, go on, Karen, you were saying.
this brings us, okay, to the definition. Now we have looked at the consequence, and now we look to the definition. Of course, there are many other consequences. We don't want to get into them now. We might get into them later.
But these are the main two strains.
Yes. And this, I am bringing this into light so people don't rush into the definition or the classification before understanding what they want to achieve. This is very important. Now, once we come to this classification, we said that the scholars classify the whole world into two abodes, mainly Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. And then they have further classifications for Dar al-Kufr. Dar al-Islam, what is Dar al-Islam? In a nutshell, okay, actually there are three main definitions for Dar al-Islam. Dar al-Islam is the land that is ruled and governed by Muslims. Okay? Within this definition, the scholars say, is it governed by Muslims or is it governed by Islam? And they differentiate between these two. Because if it is governed by Islam, it means that it might not be governed by Muslims. For example, Muslims opened this land and they appointed someone, they appointed a Muslim to implement ahkam sharia in that land, but so that land became Dar al-Islam, although the majority of the people in charge of that land is not Muslims. Okay, one thing. And the other thing, which is the most important thing, if the Muslims are ruling one land, but they are not implementing al-Islam in that land, then according to this definition, it is not considered to be Dar al-Islam. Let me repeat this point, because this is the crucial point in this definition, in this actually differentiation between Dar al-Islam as the land ruled by Islam or is the land ruled by Muslims. Those who say it is the land ruled by Islam, they said, first of all, of course, most likely, the one who is implementing al-Islam is a Muslim. But on the other side, there might be some Muslims who are in charge of this land, but they don't implement ahkam al-Islam. And what we see now in many Muslim countries, unfortunately, reflects this reality. We see some Muslim countries, but the rulers, they don't implement ahkam al-Islam.
Okay, well, this definitions we're going to look into a bit more deeply. We're going to take a short break now and return to the subject of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr. Please stay with us on Living in the West.
Love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, for those who want to enter the Jannah, the paradise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for the believers. And that's why we need to learn and we need to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, so that we submit ourselves to the orders of Allah. And this is knowledge that we need to learn. Why we're spending more time to look into the verses and to the meanings of the verses in depth, so that we can get to learn from it what we need ourselves to be steadfast, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to ponder over the meanings of the miraculous words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Living in the West. Sheikh, just before the break there, we were speaking about the classifications of Dar al-Islam or Dar al-Kufr. And you gave the explanations and explaining that we need to know what the consequences are and where we're trying to go with these classifications. Could you expand also on some of the classifications or definitions of, say, Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Ahad? Maybe here.
Okay. We were talking about the definition of Dar al-Islam, and we said that mainly there are three definitions mentioned by the fuqaha. The first one is that it is the land that is ruled by either Muslims or Islam. The second definition is that the land where the inhabitants are Muslims, or most of the inhabitants are Muslims. This is the second definition. The third definition is not looking at the ruling system. It is not looking at the population. The third definition is looking at the security dimension, which is, it means that if the Muslims are secure to implement their religion, or to practice, in another maybe better terminology, to practice their religion, then it is considered to be Dar al-Islam.
And this is a also classical definition?
This is a classical definition attributed to some Hanafi scholars, such as Al-Kasani, okay? But we have to be careful when we talk about this definition.
Yes.
And many contemporary thinkers, they quote this definition, and they say that the main criteria here, according to this definition, is security, feeling secure on yourself, on your wealth, and you have security to practice your religion. Therefore, the problem, okay, of taking this definition on a face value is that they say, shall we consider those non-Muslim countries, now European countries, they don't say non-Muslim countries, shall we consider those European countries, for example, where Muslims feel secure and they can practice their religion, shall we call them Muslim countries? They pose this question. However, as you asked about this definition, it is true that some Hanafi scholars, such as Al-Kasani and others, mentioned this criteria, feeling secure, al-aman, okay? But if you go to the other Hanafi scholars, okay, Al-Mabsut before, in the 4th year of Al-Hijrah, and some other, and Ibn Abdin and others, you will see that what Al-Kasani mentioned, or what other Hanafi scholars mentioned about security as the main criteria for considering any abode as Dar al-Islam, is that he didn't mean it. He didn't mean feeling security full stop, irrespective of the ruling system.
How did he mean it then? Did he mean it with security and a ruling system where you can implement part of the Sharia? Or?
No, he actually meant that he was talking about an indication for that, for Dar al-Islam. He was not giving the technical definition. And the proof of this is, he is a Hanafi scholar. You have to refer to the other Hanafi scholars in order to understand what he meant. So the other Hanafi scholars gave the definition which the Jumhur have given, which is the land that is ruled by Al-Islam or by Muslims. Means the supremacy is given to Al-Islam. Okay? If we go back to the definition that says most of the inhabitants are Muslims, then this land will be considered as Dar al-Islam. According to this definition, those fuqaha who mentioned it, they meant that once most of the inhabitants of any land are Muslims, then inevitably or for sure the ruling system will be al-Islam or will be Sharia, which means that because of the majority of inhabitants are Muslims, then the supremacy is given to al-Islam. So this goes in tandem with the previous definition, which is what? The supremacy or superiority is given to the law of Allah Jalla wa'ala. So these three definitions actually go back to one definition, which is what? The supremacy is given to al-Sharia, or given to the law of Allah Jalla wa'ala.
So, okay, now, so this is quite clear now. This is the aim of these definitions in their totality. So how important are these aims when we look at to these other definitions that we're going to speak about now?
Yeah, this is really very important. Even in the contemporary context, it is very important, because now some thinkers are saying, well, some Muslim countries, okay, or some Arab countries, or countries that are inhabited mainly by Muslims, okay, they say, according to this classification, they are not considered to be Dar al-Islam. Why? Because the supremacy is not given to Sharia. We don't want to dwell into that. That can be true. We are not denying it. It can be true. However, the real question here is that how far the supremacy is given to Sharia in any land to be considered as Dar al-Islam. Okay? Shall we say, for example, 90% of Sharia have to be implemented in any land in order to consider it as Dar al-Islam, or 50%, or what? Okay? This is a real discussion, and it needs a very detailed
what
study.
Parts of the Sharia are going to be implemented?
Exactly.
If the penal code is going to be implemented or not on these
Exactly. Some scholars, that is a very good point actually, some scholars said, if, for example, the adhan is raised freely, okay, the sha'a'ir al-zahira, even some of the penal codes, okay, practices are not implemented, then it is still considered to be Dar al-Islam. Now, we don't want to get into this because this is another field, and as I said, it needs a detailed study.
It is important for us to make it clear that there are opinions out there. I mean,
of course, yeah.
We're not sticking to one just classification.
Yes.
We are giving.
But we are just, in a summary, okay, that the land that is in general governed by al-Islam, by the law of al-Islam, the law of Allah Jalla wa Ala, is considered to be Dar al-Islam.
Okay, so the other classification, Dar al-Harb, for example, where does this work into this classification?
Now, once we understand that any land has given superiority or supremacy to al-Islam, the Sharia of Allah Jalla wa Ala, the law of Allah Jalla wa Ala is classified as Dar al-Islam, then any other land is considered by the fuqaha as Dar al-Kufr.
And then it has split sections within that.
And then within that, within Dar al-Kufr, they have mainly Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Ahd. So Dar al-Kufr, in general, it is the land that does not give supremacy to Sharia or to al-Islam. Even if most of the inhabitants are Muslims, even if the Muslims have freedom to practice elements of their religion, but if the law of Allah Jalla wa Ala is not superior to any other law, then it is not considered to be Dar al-Islam, and it is considered to be, or classified by the classical scholars, as Dar al-Kufr.
Okay, so now we've got a classification of where Dar Harb fits in, for example. The point that may be raised now is that, is it important that we stick to these notions? Especially because we have a new world order. We have things which are changing, which are not the same as they were. How important is it for us to look at these notions and stick by them?
Yeah. Well, this discourse has been prevailing since some time, really. And many people, many thinkers, because of maybe different motivations, maybe because of pressure, because of other reasons, they want to avoid these classifications. But here we have to state a very important principle. If there is a notion or a classification or a ruling that has been mentioned by our scholars, and it has been stated in the classical books, on all of them, or the vast majority of them, means that it is part of our legacy.
It's been established as part of our legacy.
It has been established as part of our legacy. We cannot just wipe it out because of certain circumstances or certain situations. Why? Because it means that there is an ijma' on it. And we cannot just break down al-ijma', or we cannot wipe it out. There is ijma' means consensus. The consensus of the scholars have accepted that the land or the globe can be classified into two classifications, Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Kufr mainly. And if we look to the basis of this ijma', we will find that the word Dar, or the classification, has been mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah. For example, in Surah Al-A'raf, سَأُرِيكُمْ دَارَ الْفَاسِقِينَ سَأُرِيكُمْ دَارَ الْفَاسِقِينَ, I will show you the dar of the rebellions. What does it mean? Dar al-Fasiqin. Dar means this land, okay, the heretics live in that land and they are controlling that land, is different from the land controlled by Muslims. Hadith ibn Abbas in Sunan al-Nasa'i, that he said that he was talking about Abu Bakr and Umar. They are from Muhajirin. Hajaru from Mecca to Medina. وَالْمَدِينَةُ كَانَتْ يَوْمَئِذٍ دَارَ شِرْكٍ. He clearly said that. دَارَ شِرْكٍ. Al-Madinah, before the migration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, كانت دار شرك.
The land of the polytheists, for example.
Yes, the land of polytheists. So that classification was known. We cannot just wipe it out. We cannot say, we cannot claim that this classification has been mentioned by the fuqaha only. No, it is mentioned in the Quran, it is mentioned in the Sunnah. Maybe it is not mentioned as it is mentioned by the fuqaha, by the classical fuqaha. Yes, there are many things like this. For example, we have wujub, tahrim, ibaha, istihbab. These 5 ahkam taklifiyya, 5 rulings. Obligation, prohibition, permissibility, dislikeness. Okay, these classifications have not been mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, have not been mentioned by the Quran, yet it is part of our legacy.
And something that we can't throw away even due to modernity, for example.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we have to be careful here. We have to be very, very careful. It is not because of certain circumstances now or pressure, we should just discard part of our legacy that has been supported by the Quran and Sunnah.
Well, Sheikh Haitham, Jazakallah khair. That's very interesting and something we're going to pick up on in the next episode of Living in the West. We hope you join us next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.